Linda. Linda stood in front of her mirror, examining herself critically in full daylight. Now past 30, she was becoming concerned with her age, although nothing about her portrayed any lessening of her beauty. She was slender, youthful in appearance. She could well deceive everyone but herself. In her own eyes, her flesh was losing some of its firmness, some of that marble smoothness that she had admired so often in her own mirror. She was no less loved. If anything, she was more loved than ever, because now she attracted all the young men who sense that it is from such a woman that they will really learn the secrets of love-making, and who feel no attraction to the young girls of their age who are backward, innocent, inexperienced, and are still possessed by their families. Linda's husband, a handsome man of 40, had loved her with the fervor of a lover for many years. He closed his eyes to her young admirers. He believed that she did not take them seriously, that her interest was due to her childlessness and the need to pour her protective feelings over people who were beginning to live. He himself was reputed to be a seducer of women of all classes and character. She remembered that on her wedding night, André had been an adoring lover, worshipping each part of her body separately as if she were a work of art, touching her and marveling, commenting on her ears, her feet, her neck, her hair, her nose, her cheeks, and her thighs as he fondled them. His words and voice, his touch, opened her flesh like a flower to the heat and light. He trained her to be a sexually perfect instrument, to vibrate to every form of caress. One time he taught her to put the rest of her body to sleep, as it were, and to concentrate all her erotic feelings in her mouth. Then she was like a woman half-drugged, lying there, her body quiet and languid, and her mouth, her lips, became another sex organ. André had a particular passion for the mouth. In the street he looked at women's mouths. To him the mouth was indicative of the sex. A tightness of lip, thinness, augured nothing rich or voluptuous. A full mouth promised an open, generous sex. A moist mouth tantalized him. A mouth that opened out, a mouth that was parted as if ready for a kiss, he would follow doggedly down the street until he could possess the woman and prove again his conviction of the revelatory powers of the mouth. Linda's mouth had seduced him from the first. It had a perverse, half-dolorous expression. There was something about the way she moved it, a passionate unfolding of the lips, promising a person who would lash around the beloved like a storm. When he first saw Linda, he was taken to her through this mouth, as if he were already making love to her. And so it was on their wedding night. He was obsessed with her mouth. It was her mouth that he threw himself on, kissing it until it burned, until the tongue was worn out, until the lips were swollen. And then, when he had fully aroused her mouth, it was thus he took her, crouching over her, his strong hips pressed against her breasts. He never treated her as a wife. He wooed her over and over again with presents, flowers, new pleasures. He took her to dinner at the Cabinet Peculier of Paris, to the big restaurants where all the waiters thought she was his mistress. He chose the most exciting food and wine for her. He made her drunk with his caressing words. He made love to her mouth. He made her say that she wanted him, and he would ask, "And how do you want me? What part of you wants me tonight?" Sometimes she answered, "My mouth wants you. I want to feel you in my mouth, way deep in my mouth." At other times she answered, "I'm moist between the legs." This is how they talked across restaurant tables in the small private dining rooms created especially for lovers. How discreet the waiters, knowing when not to return. Music would come from an invisible source. There would be a divan. When the meal was served and André had pressed Linda's knees between his and stolen kisses, he would take her on the divan with her clothes on, like lovers who do not have time to undress. He would escort her to the opera and to the theaters famed for their dark boxes and make love to her while they watched a spectacle. He would make love to her in taxis, in a barge anchored in the front of Notre Dame that rented cabins to lovers. Everywhere but at home on the marital bed. He would drive her to little far-off villages and stay at romantic inns with her. He would take her to a room for them in the luxurious houses of prostitution he had known. Then he would treat her like a prostitute. He would make her submit to his whims, ask to be whipped, asked her to crawl on her hands and knees and not to kiss him, but to pass her tongue all over him like an animal. These practices had aroused her sensuality to such a degree that she was frightened. She was afraid of the day when André would cease to be sufficient for her. Her sensuality was, she knew, vigorous. His was the last burst of a man who had spent himself on a life of excess, and now gave her the flower of it. A day came when Andre had to leave her for 10 days for a trip. Linda was restless and feverish. A friend phoned her, Andre's friend, the painter in Paris, a favorite of all women. He said to her, "Are you bored with yourself, Linda? Would you like to join us in a very special kind of party? Do you have a mask?" Linda knew exactly what he meant. She and Andre had often laughed at Jacques' parties in the Bois. It was his favorite form of amusement. On a summer night to gather society people wearing masks, drive to the Bois with bottles of champagne, find a clearing in the wooded section, and disport themselves. She was tempted. She had never participated in one. That Andre had not wanted to do. He said playfully that the question of the masks might confuse him, and that he did not want to make love to the wrong woman. Linda accepted the invitation. She put on one of her new evening dresses, a heavy satin dress which outlined her body like a wet glove. She wore no underwear, no jewelry that could identify her. She changed her hairstyle from a page boy frame around her face to a pompadour style, which revealed the shape of her face and neck. Then she tied the black mask on her face, pinning the elastic to her hair for greater security. At the last minute she decided to change the color of her hair and had it washed and tinted blue-black instead of pale blonde. Then she put it up again, and found herself so altered that it startled her. About 80 people had been asked to meet at the big studio of the fashionable painter. It was dimly lit so as to preserve the guests' identities better. When they were all there, they were to be whisked to the waiting automobiles. The chauffeurs knew where to go. In the deepest part of the woods there was a beautiful clearing covered with moss. There they sat, having sent the chauffeurs away, and began to drink champagne. Many of the caresses had already begun in the crowded automobiles. The masks gave people a liberty that turned the most refined ones into hungry animals. Hands ran under sumptuous evening dresses to touch whatever they wanted to touch. Knees intertwined, breaths came quicker. Linda was pursued by 2 men. The first of them did all he could to arouse her by kissing her mouth and breasts, while the other, with more success, caressed her legs under her long dress, until she revealed by a shudder that she was aroused. Then he wanted to carry her off into the darkness. The first man protested, but was too drunk to compete. She was carried away from the group to where the trees made dark shadows and lowered onto the moss. From nearby there were cries of resistance, there were grunts. There was a woman shrieking, do it, I can't wait any more, do it to me." The orgy was in full bloom. Women caressed one another. 2 men would set about teasing a woman into a frenzy and then stop merely to enjoy the sight of her with a dress half undone, a shoulder strap fallen, a breast uncovered, while she tried to satisfy herself by pressing obscenely against the men, rubbing against them, begging, lifting her dress. Linda was astonished by the bestiality of her aggressor. She, who had only known the voluptuous caresses of her husband, now found herself in the grip of something infinitely more powerful, a desire so violent it seemed devouring. His hands gripped her like claws. He lifted her sex to meet his penis as if he did not care if he broke her bones in so doing. He used coups de bélier, truly like a horn entering her, a goring that did not hurt, but which made her want to retaliate with the same fury. After he had satisfied himself once with a wildness and vileness that stunned her, he whispered, "Now I want you to satisfy yourself fully. Fully, do you hear me, as you never did before?" He held his erect penis like a primitive wooden symbol, held it out for her to use as she wished. He incited her to unleash her most violent appetite on him. She was hardly aware of biting into his flesh. He panted in her ears, go on, I know you women. You never really let yourself take a man as you want to." From some depth of her body that she had never known, there came a savage fever that would not spend itself, that could not have enough of his mouth. His tongue, his penis inside of her, a fever that was not content with an orgasm. She felt his teeth buried in her shoulder as her teeth bit into his neck, and then she fell backwards and lost consciousness. When she awakened, she was lying on an iron bed in a shabby room. A man was sleeping beside her. She was naked, and he too, but half covered by the sheet. She recognized the body which had crushed her the night before in the Bois. It was the body of an athlete, big, brown, muscular. The head was handsome, strong, with wild hair. As she looked at him admiringly, he opened his eyes and smiled. "I couldn't let you go back with the others. I might never have seen you again," he said. "How did you get me here?" "I stole you." "Where are we?" "In a very poor hotel which I live." "Then you're not—" I'm not a friend of the others, if that's what you mean. I am simply a workman. One night, bicycling back from my work, I saw one of your potlooses. I got undressed and joined it. The women seemed to enjoy me. I was not discovered. When I had made love to them, I stole away. Last night I was passing by again, and I heard the voices. I found you being kissed by that man, and I carried you off. Now I brought you here. It may make trouble for you, but I could not give you up. You are a real woman. The others are feeble compared to you. You've got fire. I have to leave, said Linda. But I want your promise that you'll be back. He sat up and looked at her. His physical beauty gave him a grandeur, and she vibrated at his nearness. He began to kiss her, and she felt languid again. She put her hand on his hard penis. The joys of the night before were still running through her body. She let him take her again, almost as if to make sure that she had not dreamed. No, this man who could make his penis burn through her whole body and kiss her as if it was to be the last kiss, this man was real. And so Linda returned to him. It was the place where she felt most alive. But after a year she lost him. He fell in love with another woman and married her. Linda had become so accustomed to him that now everyone else seemed too delicate, too refined, too pale, too feeble. Among the men she knew there was none that savage strength and fervor of her lost lover. She searched for him again and again in small bars in the small lost places of Paris. She met prize fighters, circus stars, athletes. With each she tried to find the same embraces, but they failed to arouse her. When Linda lost the workman because he wanted to have a woman of his own, a woman to come home to, a woman who would take care of him, she confided in her hairdresser. The Parisian hairdresser plays a vital role in the life of Frenchwomen. He not only dresses her hair, about which she is particularly fastidious, but he is an arbiter of fashion. He is her best critic and confessor in matters of love. The 2 hours that it takes to get one's hair washed, curled, and dried is ample time for confidences. The seclusion of the little cabinet protects secrets. When Linda had first arrived in Paris from the little town in the south of France where she was born, she and her husband had met, and she was only 20 years old. She was badly dressed, shy, innocent. She had luxuriant hair, which she did not know how to arrange. She used no makeup. Walking down the Rue Saint-Honoré, admiring the shop windows, she became fully aware of her deficiencies. She became aware of what the famous Parisian chic meant, that fastidiousness of detail which made of any woman a work of art. Its purpose was to heighten her physical attributes. It was created largely by the skill of the dressmaker. What no other country was ever able to imitate was the erotic quality of French clothes, the art of letting the body express all its charms through clothes. In France they know the erotic value of heavy black satin, giving the shimmering quality of a naked, wet body. They know how to delineate the contours of the breast, how to make the folds of the dress follow the movements of the body. They know the mystery of veils, of lace over the skin, of provocative underwear, of a dress daringly slit. The contour of a shoe, the sleekness of a glove, these give Parisian women a trimness and audacity that far surpasses the seductiveness of other women. Centuries of coquetry have produced a kind of perfection that is apparent not only in the rich women, but in the little shop girls. And the hairdresser is the priest of this cult for perfection. He tutors the women who come from the provinces. He refines vulgar women. He brightens pale women. He gives them all new personalities. Linda was fortunate enough to fall into the hands of Michel, whose salon was near the Champs-Élysées. Michel was a man of 40, slender, elegant, and rather feminine. He spoke suavely, had beautiful salon manners, kissed her hand like an aristocrat, and kept his little moustache pointed and glazed. His talk was bright and alive. He was a philosopher and a creator of women. When Linda came in, he cocked his head like a painter who is about to begin a work of art. After a few months, Linda emerged a polished product. Michel became, besides her confessor and director. He had not always been a hairdresser of well-to-do women. He did not mind telling her that he had begun in a very poor quarter where his father was a hairdresser. There the woman's hair was spoiled by hunger, by cheap soaps, carelessness, and rough handling. Dry as a wig, he said, too much cheap perfume. There was one young girl, I've never forgotten her. She worked for a dressmaker. She had a passion for perfume but could not afford any. I used to keep the last of the toilet water bottles for her. Whenever I gave a woman a perfume rinse, I saw to it that a little was left in the bottle, and when Gazelle came, I liked to pour it down between her breasts. She was so delighted she did not notice how I enjoyed it. I would take the collar of her dress between my thumb and forefinger, pull it out a little, and drop the perfume down, stealing a glance at her young breasts. She had a voluptuous way of moving afterwards, of closing her eyes and taking in the smell and reveling in it. She would cry out sometimes, "Oh, Michel, you've wet too much of me this time," and she would rub her dress against her breasts to dry herself. Then once I could not resist her any more. I dropped the perfume down her neck, and when she threw her head back and closed her eyes, my hand slipped right to her breasts. Well, Gazelle never came back. But that was only the beginning of my career as a perfumer of women. I began to take the task seriously. I kept perfume in an atomizer and enjoyed spraying it on the breasts of my clients. They never refused that. Then I learned to give them a little brushing after they were ready. That's a very enjoyable task, dusting the coat of a well-formed woman. And some woman's hair puts me in a state which I cannot describe to you. It might offend you, but there are women whose hair smells so intimate, like musk, that it makes a man... But I cannot always keep myself under control. You know how helpless women are when they are lying back to have their hair washed, or when they are under the dryer, or having a permanent. Michel would look over a client and say, "You could easily get 15,000 francs a month," which meant an apartment on the Champs-Élysées, a car, fine clothes, and a friend who would be generous. Or she might become a woman of the first category, the mistress of a senator, or of the writer or actor of the day. When he helped a woman reach the position due her, he maintained her secret. He never talked about anybody's life except in disguised terms. He knew a woman married for 10 years to the president of a big American corporation. She still had her prostitute's card and was well known to the police and to the hospitals where the prostitutes went for weekly examinations. Even today, she could not become altogether accustomed to her new position, and at times forgot she had the money in her pocket to tip the men who waited on her during her clipper trip across the ocean. Instead of a tip, she handed out a little card with her address. It was Michel who counseled Linda never to be jealous, that she must remember that there were more beautiful women in the world than men, especially in France, and that a woman must be generous with her husband. Think how many women would be left without a knowledge of love. He said this seriously. He thought of jealousy as a sort of miserliness. The only true generous women were the prostitutes, actresses, who did not withhold their bodies. To his mind, the meanest type of woman was the American gold digger who knew how to extract money from men without giving herself, which Michel thought a sign of bad character. He thought that every woman should at one time or another be a whore. He thought that all women deep down wished to be a whore once in their lives, and that it was good for him. It was the best way to retain a sense of being female. When Linda lost her workman, therefore, it was natural for her to consult Michel. He advised her to take up prostitution. That way, he said, she would have the satisfaction of proving to herself that she was desirable entirely apart from the question of love, and that she might find a man who would treat her with the necessary violence. In her own world she was too worshipped, adored, spoiled to know her true value as a female, to be treated with the brutality that she liked. Linda realized that this would be the best way to discover whether she was aging, losing her potency and charms. She took the address Michel gave her, got into a taxi, and was taken to a place on the Avenue du Bois, a private house with a grandiose appearance of seclusion and aristocracy. There she was received without questions. De bonne famille? That was all they wanted to ascertain. This was a house which specialized in women de bonne famille. Immediately the caretaker would telephone a client. "We have a newcomer, a woman of most exquisite refinement." Linda was shown into a spacious boudoir with ivory furniture, brocade draperies. She had taken off her hat and veil, and was standing before the large gold-framed mirror arranging her hair when the door opened. The man who came in was almost grotesque in appearance. He was short and stout, with a head too big for his body, features like an overgrown child's, too soft and hazy and tender for his age and bulk. He walked very swiftly towards her and kissed her hand ceremoniously. He said, "My dear, how wonderful it is that you were able to escape from your home and your husband." Linda was about to protest when she became aware of the man's desire to pretend. Immediately she fell into the role, but trembled within herself at the thought of yielding to this man. Already her eyes were turning toward the door, and she wondered if she could make her escape. He caught her glance and said very quickly, "You need not be afraid. What I am asking of you is nothing to be frightened about. I am grateful to you for risking your reputation to meet me here, for leaving your husband for me." I ask very little. This presence of yours here makes me very happy. I have never seen a woman more beautiful than you are, and more aristocratic. I love your perfume, and your dress, and your taste in jewelry. Do let me see your feet. Ah, what beautiful shoes, how elegant they are, and what a delicate ankle you have. It's not so often that such a beautiful woman comes to see me. I have not been lucky with women. Now it seemed to her that he looked more and more like a child, everything about him, the awkwardness of his gestures, the softness of his hands. When he lit a cigarette and smoked, she felt that this must be his first cigarette, because of the awkward way he handled it, and the curiosity with which he watched the smoke. "I cannot stay very long," she said, impelled by the need to escape. This was not at all what she expected. "I will not keep you very long. Will you let me see your handkerchief?" She offered him a delicate perfumed handkerchief. He smelled it with an air of extreme pleasure. Then he said, "I have no intention of taking you as you expect me to. I am not interested in possessing you as other men do. All I ask of you is that you pass this handkerchief between your legs and then give it to me. That is all." She realized that this would be so much easier than what she had feared. She did it willingly. He watched her as she leaned over, raised her skirt, unfastened the lace pants, and passed the handkerchief slowly between her legs. He leaned over then and put his hand over the handkerchief, merely to increase the pressure, and so that she would pass it again. He was trembling from head to foot. His eyes were dilated. Linda realized that he was in a state of great excitement. When he took the handkerchief away, he looked as if it were a woman, a precious jewel. He was too absorbed to talk. He walked over to the bed, laid the handkerchief on the bedspread, and then threw himself on it, unbuttoning his trousers as he fell. He pushed and rubbed. After a moment, he sat up on the bed, wrapped his penis with a handkerchief, and then continued jerking, finally reaching an orgasm which made him cry out with joy. He had completely forgotten Linda. He was in a state of ecstasy. The handkerchief was wet from his ejaculation. He lay back, panting. Linda left him. As she walked through the hallways of the house, she met the woman who had received her. The woman was amazed that she should want to leave so soon. "I give you one of our most refined clients," she said, "a harmless creature." It was after this episode that Linda sat in the Bois one day, watching the parade of spring costumes on a Sunday morning. She was drinking in the colors and elegance and perfumes when she became conscious of a particular perfume near her. She turned her head. To her right sat a handsome man of about 40, elegantly dressed, with his glossy black hair carefully combed back. Was it from his hair that this perfume came? It reminded Linda of her voyage to Fez, of the great beauty of the Arab men there. It had a potent effect on her. She looked at the man. He turned and smiled at her, a brilliant white smile of big strong teeth with two smaller milk teeth slightly crooked, which gave him a roguish air. Linda said, "You use a perfume which I smelled in Fez." "That's right," said the man. "I was in Fez. I bought this at the market there. I have a passion for perfumes, but since I found this one, I've never used any other." "It smells like some precious wood," said Linda. "Men should smell like precious wood. I've always dreamed of finally reaching a country in South America where there are whole forests of precious woods which exude marvelous odors. Once I was in love with patchouli, a very ancient perfume. People no longer use it. It came from India. The Indian shawls of our grandmothers were always saturated with patchouli. I like to walk along the docks, too, and smell spices in the warehouses. Do you do that?" "I do. I follow women sometimes just because of their perfume, their smell." "I wanted to stay in Fez and marry an Arab." "Why didn't you?" "Because I fell in love with an Arab once. I visited him several times. He was the handsomest man I'd ever seen. He had dark skin and enormous jet eyes, an expression of such emotion and fervor that it swept me off my feet. He had a thundering voice and the softest manner. Whenever he talked to anyone, he would stand, even in the street, holding their two hands tenderly as if he wanted to touch all human beings with the same great softness and tenderness. I was completely seduced, but what happened? One day, when it was extremely hot, we sat drinking mint tea in his garden, and he took off his turban. His head was completely shaved. It's a tradition of the Arabs. It seems that all their heads are completely shaved. That somehow cured me of my infatuation. The stranger laughed. With perfect synchronization, they got up and started to walk together. Linda was as much affected by the perfume which came from the man's hair as she would have been by a glass of wine. Her legs felt unsteady, her head foggy, her breasts swelled and fell with the deep breaths she took. The stranger watched the heaving of her breasts as if he were watching the sea unfolding at his feet. At the edge of the bois he stopped. "I live right up here," he said, pointing with his cane to an apartment with many balconies. "Would you care to come in and have an aperitif with me on my terrace?" Linda accepted. It seemed to her that, were she deprived of the perfume which enchanted her, she would suffocate. They sat on his terrace, quietly drinking. Linda leaned back languidly. The stranger continued to watch her breasts. Then he closed his eyes. Neither of them made a movement. Both of them had fallen into a dream. He was the first to move. As he kissed her, Linda was carried back to Fez, to the garden of the tall Arab. She remembered her sensations of that day, the desire to be enfolded in the white cape of the Arab, the desire for his potent voice and his burning eyes. The smile of the stranger was brilliant, like the smile of the Arab. The stranger was the Arab with thick black hair, perfumed like the city of Fez. Two men making love to her. She kept her eyes closed. The Arab was undressing her. The Arab was touching her with fiery hands. Waves of perfume dilated her body, opened it, prepared her to yield. Her nerves were set for a climax, tense, responsive. She half opened her eyes and saw the dazzling teeth about to bite into her flesh, and then his sex touched her and entered her. It was like something electrically charged, each thrust sending currents throughout her body. He parted her legs as if he wanted to break them apart. His hair fell on her face. Smelling it, she felt the orgasm coming and called out to him to increase the thrust so that they could come together. At the moment of the orgasm, he cried out in a tiger's roar, a tremendous sound of joy, ecstasy, and furious enjoyment, such as she had never heard. It was as if she had imagined the Arab would cry like some jungle animal satisfied with his prey who roars with pleasure. She opened her eyes. Her face was covered with his black hair. She took it into her mouth. Their bodies were completely tangled. Her panties had been so hurriedly pulled down that they had fallen the length of her legs and lay round her ankles, and he had somehow inserted his foot into one half of the panties. They looked at their legs bound together by this bit of black chiffon, and they laughed. She returned many times to his apartment. Her desire would begin long before each meeting as she dressed for him. At all hours of the day his perfume would issue from some mysterious source and haunt her. Sometimes, as she was about to cross a street, she would remember his scent so vividly that the turmoil between her legs would make her stand there, helpless, dilated. Something of it clung to her body and disturbed her at night when she was sleeping alone. She had never been so easily aroused. She had always needed time and caresses. But, for the Arab, as she liked to call him, it seemed as though she were always erotically prepared, so much so that she was aroused long before he touched her, and what she feared was that she would come at the very first touch of his finger on her sex. That happened once. She arrived at his apartment, moist and trembling. The lips of her sex were stiff as if they had been caressed, her nipples hard, her whole body quivering, and as he kissed her, he felt her turmoil and slipped his hand directly into her sex. The sensation was so acute that she came. And then one day, about 2 months after their liaison, she went to him, and when he took her in his arms, she felt no desire. He did not seem to be the same man. As he stood in front of her, she coldly observed his elegance and his ordinariness. He looked like any elegant Frenchman one could see walking down the Champs-Élysées or at opening nights or at the races. But what had changed him in her eyes? Why did she not feel as great intoxication she felt ordinarily in his presence? There was something so usual now about him, so like any other man, so unlike the Arab. His smile seemed less brilliant, his voice less colorful. Suddenly she fell into his arms and tried to smell his air. She cried out, "Your perfume! You have no perfume on." "It's finished," said the Arab Frenchman, "and I cannot get any like it." "But why should that upset you so?" Linda tried to recapture the mood he threw her into. She felt her body cold. She pretended. She closed her eyes and she began to imagine. She was in Fez again, sitting in a garden. The Arab was sitting at her side on a soft, low couch. He had thrown her back on the couch and kissed her while the little water fountain sang in her ears and the familiar perfume burned in an incense holder at her side. But no, the fantasy was broken. There was no incense. The place smelled like a French apartment. The man at her side was a stranger. He was deprived of his magic that made her desire him. She never wanted to see him again. Although Linda had not relished the adventure of the handkerchief, after a few months of not moving from her own sphere, she became restless again. She was haunted by memories, by stories she heard, by the feeling that everywhere around her men and women were enjoying sensual pleasure. She feared now that she had ceased to enjoy her husband. Her body was dying. She remembered being sexually awakened by an accident at a very early age. Her mother had brought her panties that were too small for her and very tight between the legs. They had irritated her skin, and at night while falling asleep she had scratched herself. As she fell asleep, the scratching became softer, and then she became aware it was a pleasurable sensation. She continued to caress her skin, and found that as her fingers came nearer the little place in the center, the pleasure increased. Under her fingers she felt a part which seemed to harden at her touch, and there found even greater sensibility. A few days later she was sent to confession. The priest sat at his chair, and she was made to kneel at his feet. He was a Dominican and wore a long cord with a tassel which fell at his right side. As Linda leaned against his knees, she felt this tassel against her. The priest had a big, warm voice which enveloped her, and he leaned down to talk to her. When she had finished with the ordinary sins, angers, lies, and so on, she paused. Observing her hesitation, he began to whisper in a much lower tone. "Do you ever have impure dreams?" "What dreams, Father?" she asked. The hard tassel that she felt just at the sensitive place between her legs affected her like a finger's caresses of the night before. She tried to move closer to it. She wanted to hear the voice of the priest, warm and suggestive, asking about the impure dreams. He said, "Do you ever have dreams of being kissed or of kissing someone?" "No, Father." Now she felt that the tassel was infinitely more affecting than her fingers, because in some mysterious way or other it was part of the priest's warm voice and his words like kisses. She pressed against him harder, looking at him. He felt that she had something to confess and asked, "Do you ever caress yourself?" "Caress myself? How?" The priest was about to dismiss the question, thinking his intuition had been an error, but the expression of her face confirmed his doubts. "Do you ever touch yourself with your hands?" It was at this moment that Linda wanted so much to be able to make one movement of friction and once again reach that extreme, overwhelming pleasure she had discovered a few nights ago. But she was afraid the priest would become aware and repulse her, and she would lose the sensation completely. She was determined to hold his attention and began. "Father, it is true. I have something very terrible to confess. I scratched myself one night, and then I caressed myself and—" my child," said the priest, "you must stop this immediately. It is impure. It will ruin your life." "Why is it impure?" asked Linda, pressing against the tassel. Her excitement was rising. The priest leaned over so close that his lips almost touched her forehead. She was dizzy. He said, "Those are the caresses that only your husband can give you. If you do it and abuse them, you will grow weak and no one will love you. How often have you done it?" "For 3 nights, Father. I've had dreams, too." "What sort of dreams?" "I've had dreams of someone touching me there." Every word she said increased her excitement, and with a pretense of guilt and shame she threw herself against the priest's knees and bowed her head as if she would cry. But it was because the touch of the tassel had brought on the orgasm, and she was shaking. The priest, thinking it was guilt and shame, took her in his arms, raised her from her kneeling position, and comforted her. Lilith. Lilith was sexually cold, and her husband half knew it in spite of her pretenses. This led to the following incident. She never took sugar because she did not want to grow plumper than she was, and she used a sugar substitute, tiny white pills which she carried in her handbag all the time. One day she ran out of them and asked her husband to buy some on his way home. So he brought her a little vial like the one she had ordered, and she put 2 of the pills into her coffee after dinner. They were sitting there together, and he was looking at her with an expression of mellow tolerance. which he often had in the face of her nervous explosions, her cries of egotism, of self-blame, of panic. To all her dramatic behavior he responded with an unwavering good humor and patience. She was always storming alone, being angry alone, going through vast emotional upheavals in which he did not take part. Possibly this was a symbol of the tension which did not take place between them sexually. He refused all her primitive, violent challenges and hostilities. He refused to enter this emotional arena with her and respond to her need of jealousies, of fears, of battles. Perhaps if he had taken up her challenges and played the games that she liked to play, perhaps then she might have felt his presence with more of a physical impact. But Lila's husband did not know the preludes to sensual desire, did not know any of the stimulants that certain jungle natures require, and so, instead of answering her as soon as he saw her hair grow electric and her face more vivid, her eyes like lightning, her body restless and jerky like a racehorse's, he retired behind this wall of objective understanding, this gentle teasing and acceptance of her, just as one watches an animal in the zoo and smiles at its antics, but is not drawn into the mood. It was this which left Lilith in a state of isolation, indeed, like a wild animal in an absolute desert. When she stormed and when her temperature rose, her husband was nowhere to be seen. He was like some bland sky looking down at her and waiting for her storm to spend itself. If he, like an equally primitive animal, had appeared at the other end of this desert, facing her with the same electric tension of hair, skin, and eyes, if he had appeared with the same jungle body, treading heavily and wanting some pretext to leap out, embrace in fury, feel the warmth and strength of his opponent, then they might have rolled down together, and the bitings might have become of another sort, and the bout might have turned into an embrace, and the hair-pulling might have brought their mouths together, their teeth together, their tongues together, and out of fury their genitals might have rubbed against each other, drawing sparks, and the two bodies would have had to enter each other to end this formidable tension. And so tonight he sat back with this expression in his eyes, and she sat under the lamp furiously painting some object, as if after she had painted it she would devour it whole. Then he said, "You know, that was not sugar I brought you and that you took for dinner. It was Spanish fly, a little powder that makes one passionate." Lilith was astounded. "And you gave me that to take?" "Yes. I wanted to see how it would affect you. I thought it might be pleasant for both of us." "Oh, Billy," she said, "what a trick to play on me, and I promised Mabel we'd go to the movies together. I can't disappoint her. She's been shut in at home for a week. Suppose it begins to affect me at the movies." "Well, if you promised you must go, but I'll be waiting for you." So in a state of fever and high tension, Lilith went to fetch Mabel. She did not dare confess what her husband had done to her. She remembered all the stories she had heard about Spanish fly. In the 18th century in France, men had made great use of it. She remembered the story of a certain aristocrat who, at the age of 40, when he was already a little weary from his assiduous love-making to all the attractive women of his time, fell so violently in love with a dancer who was only 20 years old that he spent 3 full days and nights with her in sexual intercourse with the help of Spanish fly. Lilith tried to imagine what such an experience might be, how it would take her at some unexpected moment, and she would have to run home and confess her desire to her husband. As she sat in the darkened cinema, she could not watch the screen. Her head was in chaos. She sat taut on the edge of her seat, trying to sense the effects of the drug. She pulled herself up with a start when she noticed, first of all, that she had sat with her legs far apart, her skirt up on her knees. She thought this was an expression of her already growing sexual fever. She tried to remember whether she had ever sat like this, in this position before at the movies. She saw the parted legs as the most obscene position ever imagined, and realized that the person sitting in the row in front of her, which was set so much lower, would be able to see up her skirt and regale himself with the spectacle of her fresh new panties and new garters that she had bought only that day. Everything seemed to conspire for this night of orgy. Intuitively, she must have foreseen it all when she went to buy herself panties with a fine lace ruffle on them and garters of a deep coral color, which were very becoming to her smooth dancer's legs. She brought her legs together in anger. She thought that if this wild sexual mood took hold of her just then, she would not know what to do. Would she get up suddenly and say she had a headache and leave? Or would she turn toward Mabel? Mabel had always adored her. Would she dare turn to Mabel and caress her? She had heard of women caressing each other in the movies. A friend of hers had sat this way in the darkness of the movies, and very slowly her companion's hand had unhooked the side opening of her skirt, slipping a hand into her sex, and fondled her for a long time until she had come. How often this friend had repeated the delight of sitting still, controlling the upper half of her body, sitting straight and still while a hand was caressing in the dark secretly, slowly, mysteriously. Is this what would happen to Lilith now? She had never caressed a woman. She had sometimes thought to herself how marvelous it must be to caress a woman, the roundness of the ass, the softness of the belly, that particularly soft skin between the legs, and she had tried caressing herself in the dark in the bed, just to imagine how it might feel to touch a woman. She had often caressed her own breasts, imagining that they were those of another woman. Closing her eyes now, she recalled Mabel's body in a bathing suit. Mabel with her very round breasts almost bursting from the bathing suit, her thick, soft, laughing mouth. How wonderful it would be. But still between her own legs there was no warmth of such nature to cause her to lose control and stretch her hand toward Mabel's. The pills had not taken effect yet. She was cool, even constrained between her legs. There was a tightness there, a tension. She could not relax. If she touched Mabel now, she could not have followed with a bolder gesture. Was Mabel wearing a skirt that fastened on the side, and would Mabel like to be caressed? Lilith was growing restless. Every time she forgot herself, her legs stretched open again in that pose that seemed to her so obscene, so inviting, like those gestures she had seen in the Balinese dances, stretching out and away from the sex, leaving it unprotected. The movie came to an end. Lilith drove her car silently along the dark roads. Her headlights fell on a car parked on the side of the road and suddenly illuminated a couple, not caressing in the usual sentimental way. The woman was sitting on the man's knees with her back to him. He was raising himself tautly toward her, his whole body in the pose of a man reaching a sexual climax. He was in such a state he could not stop when the lights fell on him. He stretched himself taut so as to feel the woman sitting over him, and she moved like a person half faint from pleasure. Lilith gasped at the sight, and Mabel said, "We certainly caught them at the best moment," and laughed. So Mabel knew this climax, which Lilith had not known and wanted to know. Lilith wanted to ask her, "What's it like?" But soon she would know. She would be impelled to let loose all those desires usually experienced only in fantasies, in long daydreams that filled her hours when she was alone in the house. She would sit painting and think, "Now a man with whom I am very much in love enters. He enters the room and says, 'Let me undress you.' My husband never gets undressed. He undresses by himself and then gets into bed, and if he wants me, he puts out the light. But this man will come and undress me slowly, piece by piece. That will give me so much time to feel his hands about me. He will loosen the belt, first of all, and touch my waist with his two hands and say, 'What a beautiful waist you have, and how it curves in. How slender it is.' And then he will unbutton my blouse very slowly, and I will feel his hands unbuttoning each button and touching my breasts little by little till they come out of the blouse, and then he will love them and suck at the nipples like a child, hurting me a little with his teeth, and I will feel all this creeping all over my whole body, untying each little tight nerve and dissolving me. He will get impatient with the skirt, tear at it a little. He will be in such a state of desire, he won't put out the light. He will keep looking at me with this desire, admiring me, worshipping me, warming my body with his hands, waiting until I am completely aroused, every little part of my skin." Was the Spanish fly affecting her? No, she was languid, with her fantasy beginning over again, but that was all. Yet the sight of the couple in the automobile, their state of ecstasy, was something she wanted to know. When she reached home, her husband was reading. He looked up and smiled at her mischievously. She did not want to confess that she was not affected. She was immensely disappointed in herself. What a cold woman she was, whom nothing could affect, not even this, which had once made a nobleman in the 18th century make love for 3 days and 3 nights without stopping. What a monster she was. Even her husband must not know. He would laugh at her. In the end, he would look for a more sensitive woman. So she began to undress in front of him, walking back and forth, half naked, brushing her hair in front of the mirror. Usually she never did this. She did not want him to desire her. She did not enjoy it. It was something to be done quickly, for his sake. For her, it was a sacrifice. His excitement and his enjoyment that she did not share were rather repulsive to her. She felt like a whore who was receiving money for this. She was a whore who had no feeling, and in exchange for his love and devotion she would fling this empty, unfeeling body at him. She felt ashamed to be so dead in her body. But when she had finally slipped into bed, he said, "I don't think the Spanish fly has affected you enough. I feel sleepy. You wake me up if—" Lilith tried to sleep, but all the time she was waiting to go wild with desire. After an hour she got up and went to the bathroom. She took the little tube along and took about 10 pills, thinking, "This will do it now," and she waited. During the night her husband came into her bed, but she was so tight between her legs that no moisture would come, and she had to wet his penis with saliva. The next morning she awakened weeping. Her husband questioned her. She told him the truth. Then he laughed. "But, Lila, it was a prank I played on you. That was not Spanish fly at all. I just played a prank on you." But from that moment Lilith was haunted by the idea that there might be ways of arousing herself artificially. She tried all the formulas she had heard about. She tried drinking big cups of chocolate with a great deal of vanilla in it. She tried eating onions. Alcohol did not affect her as it affected other people because she was on her guard against it from the first. She could not forget herself. She had heard about small balls that were used as an aphrodisiac in the East Indies. But how to obtain them? Where to ask for them? East Indian women inserted them inside the vagina. They were made of some very soft rubber with a soft skin-like surface. When they were introduced into the sex, they molded themselves to the form of it, and then they moved as the woman moved, sensitively shaping themselves to every motion of the muscles, causing a titillation much more exciting than that of the penis or finger. Lilith would have liked to find one and to keep it inside of herself day and night. The Veiled Woman. George once went to a Swedish bar he liked and sat at a table to enjoy a leisurely evening. At the next table he noticed a very stylish and handsome couple, the man suave and neatly dressed, the woman all in black with a veil over her glowing face and brilliant-colored jewelry. They both smiled at him. They said nothing to one another, as if they were very old acquaintances and had no need to talk. The three of them watched the activity at the bar, couples drinking together, a woman drinking alone, a man in search of adventures, and they all seemed to be thinking the same thing. Finally, the neatly dressed man began a conversation with George, who now had a chance to observe the woman at length and found her even more beautiful. But just when he expected her to join the conversation, she said a few words to her companion that George could not catch, smiled, and glided off. George was crestfallen. His pleasure in the evening was gone. Furthermore, he had only a few dollars to spend, and he could not invite the man to drink with him and discover perhaps a little more about the woman. To his surprise, it was the man who turned to him and said, "Would you care to have a drink with me?" George accepted. Their conversation went from experiences with hotels in the south of France to George's admission that he was badly in need of money. The man's response implied that it was extremely easy to obtain money. He did not go on to say how. He made George confess a little more. Now, George had a weakness common in many men when he was in expansive mood. He loved to recount his exploits. He did this in an intriguing language. He hinted that as soon as he set foot in the street, some adventure presented itself, that he was never at a loss for an interesting evening or for an interesting woman. His companion smiled and listened. When George had finished talking, the man said, "That is what I expected of you the moment I saw you. You're the fellow I'm looking for. I'm confronted with an immensely delicate problem, something absolutely unique. I don't know if you've had many dealings with difficult, neurotic women, no? I can see that from your stories. Well, I have. Perhaps I attract them. Just now I'm in the most intricate situation. I hardly know how to get out of it. I need your help. You say you need money. Well, I can suggest a rather pleasant way of making some. Listen carefully. There's a woman who is wealthy and absolutely beautiful. In fact, flawless. She could be devoutly loved by anybody she pleased. She could be married to anyone she pleased. But for one perverse accident of her nature, she only likes the unknown. But "But everybody likes the unknown," said George, thinking immediately of voyages, unexpected encounters, and novel situations. "No, not in the way she does. She's interested only in a man she's never seen before and will never see again, and for this man she'll do anything." George was burning to ask if the woman was the one who had been sitting at the table with them, but he did not dare. The man seemed to be rather unhappy to have to tell, and yet was impelled to tell, the story. He continued, "I have this woman's happiness to watch over. I will do anything for her. I have devoted my life to satisfying her caprices." "I understand," said George. I'd feel the same way about her." "Now," said the elegant stranger, "if you would like to come with me, you could perhaps solve your financial difficulties for a week, and incidentally perhaps your desire for adventure." George flushed with pleasure. They left the bar together. The men hailed a taxi. In the taxi he gave George $50, and then he said he was obliged to blindfold him, that George must not see the house he was going to, nor the street, as he was never to repeat this experience. George was in a turmoil of curiosity now, with visions of the woman he had seen at the bar haunting him, seeing each moment her glowing mouth, her burning eyes behind the veil. What he had particularly liked was her hair. He liked thick hair that weighted a face down, a gracious burden, odorous and rich. It was one of his passions. The ride was not very long. He submitted amiably to all the mystery. The blindfold was taken off his eyes before he came out of the taxi, so as not to attract the attention of the taxi driver or the doorman, but the stranger had counted wisely on the glare of the entrance lights to blind George completely. He could see nothing but brilliant lights and mirrors. He was ushered into one of the most sumptuous interiors he had ever seen, all white and mirrored, with exotic plants, exquisite furniture covered in damask, and such a soft rug that their steps were not heard. He was led through one room after another, each in different shades, all mirrored, so that he lost all sense of perspective. Finally they came to the last. He gasped slightly. He was in a bedroom with a canopied bed set on a dais. There were furs on the floor and vaporous white curtains at the windows, and mirrors, more mirrors. He was glad he could bear these repetitions of himself, infinite reproductions of a handsome man to whom the mystery of the situation had given a glow of expectation and alertness he had never known. What could this mean? He did not have time to ask himself. The woman who had been at the bar entered the room, and just as she entered, the woman who had brought them to this place vanished. She had changed her dress. She wore a striking satin gown that left her shoulders bare and was held in place by a ruffle. George had the feeling that the dress would fall off from her in one gesture, stripped from her like a glistening sheath, and that underneath would appear her glistening skin, which shone like satin and was equally smooth to the fingers. He had to hold himself in check. He could not believe that this beautiful woman was offering herself to him, a complete stranger. He felt shy, too. What did she expect of him? What was her quest? Did she have an unfulfilled desire? He had only one night to give all his lover's gifts. He was never to see her again. Could it be he might find the secret of her nature and possess her more than once? He wondered how many men had come into this room. She was extraordinarily lovely, with something of both satin and velvet in her. Her eyes were dark and moist, her mouth glowed, her skin reflected the light. Her body was perfectly balanced. She had the incisive lines of a slender woman, together with a provocative ripeness. Her waist was very slim, which gave her breasts an even greater prominence. Her back was like a dancer's, and every undulation set off the richness of her hips. She smiled at him. Her mouth was soft and full and half open. George approached her and laid his mouth on her bare shoulders. Nothing could be softer than her skin. What a temptation to push the fragile dress from her shoulder and expose the breast which distended the satin. What a temptation to undress her immediately. But George felt that this woman could not be treated so summarily, and that she required subtlety and adroitness. Never had he given to his gesture so much thought and artistry. He seemed determined to make a long siege of it, and as she gave no sign of hurry, he lingered over her bare shoulders, inhaling the faint and marvelous odor that came from her body. He could have taken her then and there, so potent was the charm she cast, But first he wanted her to make a sign. He wanted her to be stirred, not soft and pliant like wax under his fingers. She seemed amazingly cool, obedient, but without feeling. Never a ripple on her skin, and though her mouth was parted for kissing, it was not responsive. They stood there near the bed without speaking. He passed his hands along the satin curves of her body as if to become familiar with it. She was unmoved. He slipped slowly down to his knees as he kissed and caressed her body. His fingers felt that under the dress she was naked. He led her to the edge of the bed, and she sat down. He took off her slippers. He held her feet in his hands. She smiled at him, gently, invitingly. He kissed her feet, and his hands ran under the folds of the long dress, feeling the smooth legs up to the thighs. She abandoned her feet to his hands, held them pressed against his chest now, while his hands ran up and down her legs under the dress. If her skin was so soft along the legs, what would it be then near her sex, where it is always the softest? Her thighs were pressed together so he could not continue to explore. He stood and leaned over her to kiss her into a reclining position. As she lay back, her legs opened, slightly. He moved his hands all over her body as if to kindle each little part of it with his touch, stroking her again from shoulders to feet before he tried to slide his hand between her legs, more open now, so that he could almost reach her sex. With his kisses, her hair had become disheveled, and the dress had fallen off her shoulders and partly uncovered her breasts. He pushed it off altogether with his mouth, revealing the breasts he had expected, tempting, taut, and of the finest skin, with roseate tips like those of a young girl. Her yielding almost made him want to hurt her so as to rouse her in some way. The caresses roused him, but not her. Her sex was cool and soft to his finger, obedient, but without vibrations. George began to think that the mystery of the woman lay in her not being able to be aroused, but it was not possible. Her body promised such sensuality. The skin was so sensitive, the mouth so full. It was impossible that she should not feel. Now he caressed her continuously, dreamfully, as if he were in no hurry, waiting for the flame to be kindled in her. There were mirrors all around them, repeating the image of the woman lying there, her dress fallen off her breasts, her beautiful naked feet hanging over the bed, her legs slightly parted under the dress. He must tear off the dress completely, lie in bed with her, feel her whole body against his. He began to pull the dress down, and she helped him. Her body emerged like that of Venus coming out of the sea. He lifted her so that she would lie fully on the bed, and his mouth never ceased kissing every part of her body. Then a strange thing happened, when he leaned over to feast his eyes on the beauty of her sex, its rosiness. She quivered, and George almost cried out for joy. She murmured, "Take your clothes off." He undressed. Naked, he knew his power. He was more at ease naked than clothed because he had been an athlete, a swimmer, a walker, a mountain climber. And he knew then that he could please her. She looked at him. Was she pleased? When he bent over her, was she more responsive? He could not tell. By now he desired her so much that he could not wait to touch her with the tip of his sex, but she stopped him. She wanted to kiss and fondle it. She set about this with so much eagerness that he found himself with her full backside near his face and able to kiss and fondle her to his content. But now he was taken with a desire to explore and touch every nook of her body. The opening of her sex he opened with his 2 fingers, and he feasted his eyes on the glowing skin, the delicate flow of honey, the hair curling around his fingers. His mouth grew more and more avid, as if it had become a sex organ in itself, capable of so enjoying her that if he continued to fondle her flesh with his tongue, he would reach some absolutely unknown pleasure. As he bit into her flesh with such delicate sensation, he felt again in her a quiver of pleasure. Now he forced her away from his sex, for fear she might experience all her pleasure merely kissing him, and that he would be cheated of feeling himself inside her womb. It was as if they had both become ravenously hungry for the taste of flesh, and now the 2 mouths melted into each other, seeking the leaping tongues. Her blood was fired now. By his slowness he seemed to have done this at last. Her eyes shone brilliantly. Her mouth could not leave his body, and finally he took her as she offered herself, opening her vulva with her lovely fingers as if she could no longer wait. Even then they suspended their pleasure, and she felt him quietly enclosed. Then she pointed to the mirror and said, laughing, "Look, it appears as if we weren't even making love, as if I was sitting on your knees, and you rascal, you have had it inside me all the time, and you're even quivering. Oh, I can't bear this pretending. I have nothing inside. It's burning me up. Move now, move!" She threw herself over him so that she could gyrate around his erect penis, deriving from this erotic dance a pleasure which made her cry out. And at the same time a lightning flash of ecstasy tore through George's body. Despite the intensity of their love-making when he left, she did not ask him his name. She did not ask him to return. She gave him a light kiss on his almost painful lips and sent him away. For months the memory of this night haunted him, and he could not repeat the experience with any woman. One day he encountered a friend who had just been paid lavishly for some articles and invited him to have a drink. He told George the spectacular story of a scene he had witnessed. He was spending money freely in a bar when a very distinguished man approached him and suggested a pleasant pastime, observing a magnificent love scene. And, as George's friend happened to be a confirmed voyeur, the suggestion met with instant acceptance. He had been taken to a mysterious house, into a sumptuous apartment, and concealed in a dark room, where he had seen a nymphomaniac making love with an especially gifted and potent man. George's heart stood still. "Describe her," he said. His friend described the woman George had made love to, even to the satin dress. He also described the canopied bed, the mirrors, everything. George's friend had paid $100 for the spectacle, but it had been worthwhile, and it had lasted for hours. Poor George. For months he was wary of women. He could not believe such perfidy, such play-acting. He became obsessed with the idea that women who invited him to their apartments were all hiding some spectator behind a curtain.